Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The office buzzed as employees filtered in, their usual work attire replaced by an explosion of color and creativity. The annual costume party had arrived, and this year's theme pushed boundaries like never before. Gender-swapping outfits transformed familiar faces into dazzling new personas, turning the mundane workspace into a vibrant carnival of self-expression. Heads turned as Joe from accounting made his grand entrance. Gone was the mild-mannered number cruncher, replaced by a vision of 18th century French royalty. His Marie Antoinette ensemble left jaws on the floor. An enormous powdered wig teetered precariously atop his head, festooned with silk flowers and glittering jewels. Layers of sumptuous fabric cascaded from his shoulders, creating a skirt so wide he had to turn sideways to fit through the door. "Let them eat cake!" Joe trilled, flourishing a bedazzled fan. His falsetto voice cracked slightly, sending him into a fit of giggles that set his wig wobbling dangerously. Not to be outdone, Omar from sales sashayed into view. The normally reserved team leader had transformed himself into the very picture of Egyptian royalty. A golden headdress framed kohl-rimmed eyes, and yards of shimmering fabric draped artfully over his lean frame. Ornate jewelry clinked with each deliberate step as he made his way to the punch bowl. "Behold, your queen approaches," Omar intoned, struggling to keep a straight face as he attempted to maintain his regal bearing. The women of the office had risen to the challenge with equal enthusiasm. Amara from HR, usually known for her impeccable suits and no-nonsense attitude, had undergone a startling metamorphosis. Her petite frame was now buried beneath layers of muscle padding, creating the illusion of bulging biceps and a barrel chest. A veritable forest of gold chains hung around her neck, and a distinctive mohawk wig completed her uncanny Mr. T impersonation. "I pity the fool who don't enjoy this party," Amara growled, her voice pitched comically low as she jabbed a finger at a nearby coworker. Emily from marketing had taken a swashbuckling approach to the evening's festivities. Her Jack Sparrow costume was a triumph of detail, from the weathered tricorn hat perched jauntily on her head to the assortment of trinkets woven into her long, braided wig. A toy parrot was affixed to her shoulder, and she brandished a plastic cutlass with gleeful abandon. "Savvy," Emily slurred, affecting Captain Jack's distinctive swagger as she wove through the crowd. The usually staid conference room had been transformed into a glittering wonderland. Strings of twinkling lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. Tables groaned under the weight of an impressive spread. Finger foods artfully arranged to resemble miniature works of art, and a punch bowl that glowed an otherworldly shade of blue. In one corner, a DJ booth had been set up, manned by Todd from IT. He'd foregone an elaborate costume in favor of a simple gender swap, donning a sparkly cocktail dress that clashed magnificently with his full beard. Despite his low-key approach to the theme, Todd was throwing himself into his musical duties with gusto, fingers flying over his equipment as he seamlessly blended one upbeat track into the next. As the night wore on, inhibitions fell away and the dance floor filled. Joe's enormous skirts created a hazard as he attempted to bust a move, but he embraced the challenge with admirable determination. Omar discovered that his Cleopatra wig made for excellent headbanging during a particularly energetic rock number, much to the delight of his coworkers. Amara's Mr. T costume proved surprisingly aerodynamic as she led a conga line around the room, gold chains swinging in time to the beat. Emily, fully committed to her role as Captain Jack, attempted to teach a group of giggling accountants the finer points of sword fighting using plastic cutlery liberated from the snack table. In a quiet corner, away from the dance floor's frenetic energy, a small group had gathered for an impromptu costume contest. Judgment criteria seemed to be based largely on enthusiasm rather than execution, leading to heated debates and much laughter. "I'm telling you, Cleopatra's eyeliner game is on point," argued Brielle from customer service, who had come dressed as a strikingly convincing Freddie Mercury. "Omar clearly spent hours getting that look just right." "True, but have you seen the engineering that went into Joe's wig?" countered Derek from Research and Development, resplendent in a pitch-perfect Wonder Woman costume. "I'm pretty sure it defies several laws of physics. That's got to count for something." The discussion was interrupted by a commotion near the refreshment table. Emily, still deep in character as Jack Sparrow, had climbed atop a chair and was brandishing a plastic cup of punch like it was the finest rum in all the Caribbean. "Why is the rum always gone?" she lamented, swaying precariously. Her audience, equally committed to the spirit of the evening, played along with gusto. "Because you drank it all, you scurvy dog!" shouted Amara, as Mr. T, shaking her gold-bedecked fist in mock outrage. Emily's eyes widened in feigned surprise. "Well, why'd I do that?" The exchange devolved into laughter, with Emily making an exaggerated bow that nearly sent her toppling from her perch. Quick-thinking coworkers steadied her chair, averting potential disaster and earning a slurred, "Thank ye kindly, me hearties," for their troubles. As the night progressed, the initial novelty of the gender-swapped costumes gave way to a deeper appreciation for the creativity and effort on display. Conversations flowed freely, uninhibited by the usual office hierarchies. The CEO, dressed as a startlingly convincing Marilyn Monroe, chatted animatedly with interns and department heads alike, her platinum wig bobbing as she laughed at their jokes. In the spirit of the occasion, many found themselves adopting mannerisms to match their costumes. Joe, still resplendent as Marie Antoinette, affected a delicate, mincing walk that was at odds with his usual confident stride. The effect was somewhat ruined by his need to hitch up his voluminous skirts every few steps, but the commitment to the bit was admirable. Omar's Cleopatra had developed a habit of issuing grand proclamations, each more outlandish than the last. "I decree," he announced to no one in particular, "that Casual Friday shall henceforth include togas." This was met with cheers from nearby partygoers, who were perhaps imagining the chaos such an edict would cause in the HR department. Not to be outdone, Amara as Mr. T had taken to dispensing wisdom in her character's distinctive style. "I pity the fool who don't meet their quarterly targets," she growled at a group of sales reps, who nodded solemnly before dissolving into giggles. Emily's Jack Sparrow had gathered a small crowd, regaling them with increasingly improbable tales of adventure on the high seas. Her story about outrunning a kraken using nothing but a rubber ducky and a ball of twine had her audience in stitches, even as they marveled at her ability to stay in character after several cups of the alarmingly blue punch. As midnight approached, the party showed no signs of winding down. If anything, the energy in the room seemed to be building, fed by the joy of shared absurdity and the rare opportunity to see colleagues in an entirely new light. A spontaneous dance-off erupted in the center of the room, with participants challenged to perform moves that suited their costumes. Joe's attempt at a courtly minuet in his enormous Marie Antoinette gown sent ripples of laughter through the crowd, while Omar's Cleopatra surprised everyone with a series of impressively fluid belly dancing movements. Not to be outdone, Amara as Mr. T launched into an enthusiastic, if somewhat uncoordinated breakdancing routine, gold chains flying as she attempted to spin on her back. Emily's Jack Sparrow contribution involved a lot of drunken swaying and exaggerated arm movements, occasionally punctuated by attempts to fence with imaginary opponents. The impromptu competition drew more participants, each trying to outdo the last in terms of ridiculousness. The CEO's Marilyn Monroe shocked everyone with a surprisingly accurate recreation of the iconic Happy Birthday, Mr. President performance, complete with breathy vocals and a shimmy that sent her colleagues into fits of applause and laughter. As the dance-off reached its crescendo, Todd the DJ proved he was more than just a pretty face in a sparkly dress. Abandoning his post at the music booth, he launched into a flawless rendition of Madonna's Vogue, striking pose after pose with a deadpan expression that had the entire office howling with delight. The night wore on, a blur of laughter, dance, and increasingly outlandish antics. Friendships were forged and strengthened in the crucible of shared absurdity. The usual office cliques dissolved, replaced by a sense of camaraderie that transcended department boundaries and job titles. In one corner, the sales team and the accounting department, groups that normally regarded each other with mild suspicion, were engaged in an intense but friendly debate about whether Marie Antoinette or Cleopatra would win in a no-holds-barred cage match. Joe and Omar, the unwitting subjects of this hypothetical battle, found themselves drawn into the discussion, each championing the other's historical figure with surprising passion. "Listen," Joe said, jabbing a lace-gloved finger at Omar. "Your fancy eyeliner is no match for my gravity-defying hair.
One good whack with this wig and you'd be down for the count."
Omar scoffed, his fake eyelashes fluttering dramatically.
"Please, I have the wisdom of the ancient Egyptians on my side.
I'd have you wrapped up like a mummy before you could say, 'Let them eat cake.'" The discussion might have continued indefinitely, if not for the timely intervention of Emily as Jack Sparrow, who staggered into their midst with a fresh round of drinks and a gleam of mischief in her kohl-rimmed eyes. "Gentlemen," she slurred, draping her arms around Joe and Omar's shoulders. "Why fight when we could form the most fearsome pirate crew the world has ever seen? Think about it. The luxury of French royalty, the mystique of ancient Egypt, and the freedom of the high seas. The absurdity of the image, Marie Antoinette and Cleopatra as swashbuckling buccaneers, broke the tension, sending the group into peals of laughter that drew curious onlookers from across the room. As the night deepened, the party showed no signs of slowing. If anything, the energy seemed to build with each passing hour, fueled by the joy of shared absurdity and the rare opportunity to see colleagues in an entirely new light. In a quiet corner, away from the dance floor's frenetic energy, a small group had gathered for an impromptu philosophy discussion. The incongruity of their appearance only added to the surreal nature of the conversation. "But think about it," mused Derek as Wonder Woman, gesturing expansively with a plastic cup of punch. "If we're all dressed as someone else tonight, are we really being more authentic? Or less?" Brielle's Freddie Mercury nodded thoughtfully, mustache slightly askew. "It's like that old saying, give a man a mask and he'll show you his true face. Maybe by pretending to be someone else, we're actually revealing more of ourselves than we usually do." The CEO's Marilyn Monroe leaned in, her platinum wig glowing under the party lights. "I think you're onto something there. I've learned more about some of you tonight than I have in years of staff meetings." This philosophical turn prompted a round of contemplative nods, momentarily punctuated by Amara as Mr. T's gravelly voice floating over from nearby.
"I pity the fool who don't engage in meaningful self-reflection."
The moment of depth was fleeting, however, as the DJ switched to a popular dance track that had the entire room cheering. The impromptu philosophers exchanged grins before allowing themselves to be swept back into the joyous chaos of the dance floor. As the party entered its final hours, a sense of bittersweet nostalgia began to creep in around the edges of the revelry. Co-workers who had barely spoken before tonight now found themselves making plans for coffee dates and weekend outings. The barriers that usually separated departments and hierarchies had been well and truly shattered, replaced by a warm sense of camaraderie. Joe, his Marie Antoinette wig now slightly lopsided, found himself in a heartfelt conversation with a junior accountant he'd barely noticed before.
"You know,"
he said, patting the younger man's arm,
"you've got some brilliant ideas. We should talk more about that cost-saving proposal when we're back in the office."
Omar's Cleopatra had gathered a small court of admiring colleagues, all hanging on his every pronouncement.
"Next year,"
he declared, eyeliner smudged but regal bearing intact,
"we shall have a toga party. I have spoken."
The suggestion was met with enthusiastic cheers, even as several people made mental notes to start working on their togas well in advance. Amara had finally broken character, her Mr. T scowl replaced by a wide grin as she chatted with members of the IT department. "You guys are hilarious!" she laughed, gold chains jingling. "How have we never hung out before? We need to fix that." Emily, still swaying slightly in her Jack Sparrow getup, was already planning future adventures. "Next time," she announced to anyone within earshot, "we're doing a pirate-themed team-building exercise. Trust falls off the plank. Savvy?" The idea was met with more enthusiasm than was perhaps wise, given the amount of punch that had been consumed. As the night began to wind down, there was a palpable sense that something special had occurred. More than just a costume party, it had been a transformative experience, allowing everyone to step outside their usual roles and see each other, and themselves, in a new light. The CEO, still channeling Marilyn Monroe, climbed onto a chair to address the room. Smoothing down her dress, she waited for the music to die down before speaking. "What a night, eh?" she said, her voice carrying easily over the crowd.
"I want to thank each and every one of you for throwing yourselves into this so wholeheartedly."
"It's been an absolute joy to see you all letting loose and having fun." A cheer went up from the assembled partygoers, punctuated by the clinking of Amara's gold chains and a hearty "R" from Emily. "More than that," the CEO continued, "I've been amazed by the creativity, humor, and teamwork I've seen tonight. If we can bring even a fraction of this energy back to our day-to-day work, there's nothing we can't accomplish." Another round of cheers, louder this time. Joe's wig wobbled dangerously as he clapped, while Omar struck a regal pose, basking in the collective enthusiasm. "So, here's to all of you," the CEO concluded, raising her glass in a toast. "To new friendships, to breaking down barriers, and to never being afraid to be a little bit ridiculous now and then. Cheers!" The room erupted in applause and a cacophony of clinking glasses. As the music swelled once more, filling the room with pulsing beats, it was clear that the party was far from over. The night stretched ahead, full of promise and the potential for more memories to be made. In that moment, surrounded by colleagues turned friends, all decked out in their gender-swapped finery, it felt like anything was possible. The mundane concerns of office life felt a million miles away, replaced by a sense of shared joy and limitless potential. As dawn began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, the party showed signs of finally winding down. Wigs were askew, makeup smudged, and more than a few costume pieces had been shed in the heat of enthusiastic dancing. But the smiles remained, bright and genuine, as co-workers said their goodbyes and made plans to meet up again soon. The office would never quite be the same after this night. Come Monday morning, when they all returned to their usual roles and responsibilities, there would be a new undercurrent of warmth and understanding. The memory of this night, of laughter shared and boundaries crossed, would linger, a secret smile shared between colleagues who had seen each other at their most gloriously ridiculous. As the last of the partygoers filtered out into the early morning light, there was a sense that something truly special had occurred. more than just a costume party. It had been a celebration of creativity, of breaking free from expectations, and of the joy that comes from allowing yourself to be silly in the company of others. The gender-swapped office party had done more than just provide a night of entertainment. It had reminded everyone of the humanity behind the job titles, the individual behind the employee ID number. In dressing up as someone else, they had all somehow become more authentically themselves. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the office windows, a small group of revelers remained, determined to squeeze every last drop of joy from the night. Emily, still swaying slightly in her Jack Sparrow costume, had commandeered a potted plant and was using it as an impromptu helm. "Steady as she goes, lads!" she called out, her voice hoarse from hours of staying in character. "There be treasure on the horizon!" Joe, his Marie Antoinette wig now perched precariously atop his head like a powdered bird's nest, stumbled over to join her. His elaborate gown was wrinkled beyond repair, but his grin was as bright as ever. "What sort of treasure, Captain?" he asked, affecting a passable French accent. Emily squinted into the distance, which in reality was just the break room. "Why, the most valuable booty of all, me hearty. Coffee!" This declaration was met with a cheer from the remaining partygoers. Omar, still resplendent in his Cleopatra costume despite the smudged eyeliner, raised an imaginary goblet. "I support this quest," he announced regally. "Let it be written! Let it be done!" Amara, her Mr. T costume now missing several chains but her enthusiasm undimmed, growled her agreement. "I pity the fool who stands between me and my morning Joe." The ragtag group set off on their caffeine quest, weaving unsteadily between discarded cups and fallen streamers. Their progress was punctuated by laughter and the occasional stumble, as high heels and elaborate costumes proved challenging to navigate in their fatigued state. As they entered the break room, they found it transformed in the early morning light. What had once been a mundane space for hurried lunches and water cooler gossip now seemed imbued with a touch of magic. Perhaps it was the lingering effects of the night's festivities, or simply the camaraderie of shared exhaustion, but there was a sense that anything could happen. Emily made a beeline for the coffee machine, her pirate swagger more pronounced than ever. "Stand back, ye landlubbers," she warned, brandishing a coffee filter like a rightless. "This be delicate work." Joe leaned against the counter, his enormous skirts billowing around him.
"You know,"
he mused, watching Emily's efforts with amusement.
"I don't think I've ever seen the sun rise from the office before. It's kind of beautiful."
Amara nodded, her Mr. T scowl softening into something more contemplative. "Yeah, man. It's like seeing everything with new eyes, you know?" Omar struck a dramatic pose by the window, his silhouette outlined by the golden light.
"A new dawn. A new day,"
he intoned, channeling his inner Egyptian queen. "What wonders shall it bring?" As the rich aroma of brewing coffee began to fill the air, the group fell into a comfortable silence. The events of the night played through their minds like a happy blur. The laughter, the dancing, the unexpected connections forged. Emily, having successfully wrangled the coffee machine, began to pour out steaming cups for her companions. As she handed them out, she couldn't help but marvel at the scene. Here they were, a pirate, a French queen, an Egyptian pharaoh, and Mr. T, sharing a quiet moment as the world outside began to wake. "You know," she said, breaking the silence, "I think this might be my favorite part of the whole night." Joe raised an eyebrow, nearly dislodging his wig in the process. "Even better than your epic Kraken battle reenactment?" Emily grinned, raising her coffee cup in a toast. "Even better. Don't get me wrong, that was pretty awesome. But this feels special." Amara nodded, her gold chains jingling softly. I get what you mean. It's like we've seen each other at our silliest, and now we're just us. But better versions of us, maybe. Omar sipped his coffee thoughtfully. I concur. There's a vulnerability in this moment that's quite refreshing. As they stood there, sipping their coffee and watching the sun climb higher in the sky, a sense of possibility seemed to hang in the air. The night's festivities had broken down barriers and opened up new avenues of connection. What would these new dynamics mean for their day-to-day work life? Joe was the first to broach the subject. So, he said, attempting to strike a casual pose despite his voluminous skirts. How do we carry this energy forward? I mean, I'm not suggesting we come to work in costume every day, but you don't want to lose this feeling. Emily finished for him, nodding in understanding. Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. Amara set her coffee down with a decisive clink. I say we make it a regular thing. Not the full-on party, but maybe a monthly casual get-together? No job titles, no shop talk, just this. Omar's eyes lit up at the suggestion. Oh, I like that idea. We could take turns organizing it, perhaps with different themes each time. The group began to buzz with excitement, tossing ideas back and forth. Movie nights, game tournaments, potluck dinners. The possibilities seemed endless. As they talked, the initial post-party fatigue began to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of enthusiasm. Emily, caught up in the moment, hopped onto a chair, raising her coffee cup high. Here's to new traditions and stronger bonds, she declared, her Jack Sparrow swagger in full force. May we always remember the night we all went a little mad together? The others cheered, clinking their cups together in a somewhat uncoordinated toast. As they laughed at their own clumsiness, there was a palpable sense that something had shifted. The office dynamics would never be quite the same after this night.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!